What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. Who's your BFF?
Oh, I was going to ask you that question. Do you have a best friend? Like, is that a thing? Do you have a best friend?
I have like very close friends, but like I feel like I have like a group of close friends.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah,
a cluster of BFFs.
There's like people I like text first or like tell
Yeah.
things to first.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe how.
Did they text you back, or is it just one-way communication? Because that's an indicator if they're BFFs or not. I just going to toss that out there for you.
I don't know if you're on social media. I know that you're kind of young, but also kind of old. So I don't know.
I'm going to say, where are we going with this one there, Sylvia?
I don't know if you're on social media that much, but
Like the Snaptagram and all those social medias.
Have you ever heard the sound bite where it's like, oh, I'm definitely your best friend? Like, have you ever heard that?
It's good.
That made me think, oh, I'm
Definitely your best friend. Would you say you got like a little community of best friends, BFFs?
Yeah.
Do you want to give them shout outs? I mean, if they're your BFFs, or are you worried like, I'm not going to say Tina, and therefore.
Who doesn't make the cut? Yeah. No. Or like if I make it in a list and be like, really, I'm fourth on the list.
On the list? Wow. How did I not make the top 3?
Yeah.
Missed one birthday party. It's interesting. I think I was trying to think through this. This is going to sound like I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to say it. I do genuinely think my wife is my best friend. Like can share with her, connect with her. My brother, he's somebody in my life that I know I can connect with and talk through everything. And not everybody feels that way about their family, right? So like I feel very special there. And I would say that with all my siblings, I think him being a dude has a special connection in there because like we can talk about what it's like being a husband and being a father and all those kinds of pieces. And then I've had a ton of people that have come in and out of our life that I would feel that way, very closely connected with. Guys that maybe I don't have like the... we're hanging out every week, but I know if I could pick up the phone and call them, like these are my guys and they're not going to judge me. They're going to want to have conversations and be there for you and stuff like that. And they've just got kids as well that keep them super busy and tired all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say too, like there's definitely like a group, because like that's what's hard too, is like when you talk about your family or like your siblings or spouse, like
feels like you're cheating.
No, it just
like
feels like
that can be your best friend.
And it feels too like these are my friends, and then like those are different categories.
Sure,
but like
I get that.
I would say even my sister-in-law, I tell her a ton of stuff. Like,
yeah,
I have really good in-laws too.
Yeah,
so that's nice to have, and I guess that's true. Not everybody has that.
So what we learned here is I'm number 4 on your list. Is that what we picked up? I'm number 4.
Whatever you have to tell yourself. You're lucky you even made the list.
Lucky to make the cut. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Well, kind of. So, David.
Yeah.
Our series, Real Friends, talking about Jonathan and David, which really is such a like interesting dynamic that you did like talk about. Like, how crazy is this that Jonathan is the prince? Like, he is Saul's son. Like, David is supposed to be taking that role.
Yeah.
And
he's a threat. Like, let's just be honest. Politically, the guy's a threat.
It shouldn't make sense.
Shouldn't make 0 sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that. I just think that, and again, like, maybe this is why, yes, the David and Goliath piece is really cool. And like, I think you said it before, like that's why there's movies about it and people talk about it and whatever else. But I think like there's so many reasons why this would make like such a good movie.
Yeah.
It's like it's drama. There's action. Like there's so many cool pieces to this. So when people say they don't read their Bible because it's boring, you're not reading.
They don't read the Old Testament.
Yes.
Yeah. They don't get to Chronicles and Kings and Samuel.
Yeah. Do you want to give just a quick recap of your message?
Yeah. So we're just chatting through David and his story with everything. And, we talked about his anointing. We talked about David and Goliath and God choosing David, God making the victory for David. And now, in a lot of ways, this is just a unique friendship because it's really about Jonathan more than it is about David. And it's just this idea that right from the get-go, Jonathan is like, our souls are connected. I love you, man. I'm there for you. And I have your back. David has just been David. And this is really more about the character of Jonathan and Jonathan being obedient to what he sees God doing in David's life and him wanting to be a part of that. Even so, from the very beginning, he just puts his status, he puts his claim, he puts his rights, he puts everything down at David's feet and says, nope, I'm behind you, man. Even later on in the passage when David is on the run because Saul, Jonathan's dad, is trying to kill him, and David can't be around there. He's got to protect himself, and he's tired, he's weary, he's exhausted, he's emotionally spent, he's got doubts and confusion and chaos going through his brain. And Jonathan shows up and is like, hey, don't give up. God's still in this. God's still got a plan for it. You will be king, and I will be your second. Like just that clarity piece again and again. And I have a friend who speaks in that. And just so we talked about just this idea of, hey, how can we be that friend? What does that look like for us? And also the importance of finding that, being a Jonathan and finding a Jonathan, you know?
And so we had somebody ask a question, and I want to do it first just because we were just talking about, you know, our spouses being our best friends.
Yeah.
Does Jonathan need to be someone other than a spouse? Like, does your Jonathan, because you kept saying, like, you have to find your Jonathan. Like, so does your Jonathan need to be someone other than your spouse? David differentiated his love for Jonathan versus that of a woman. So that's where that came from.
Yep.
And then what needs could Jonathan fill that a spouse can't, or vice versa? Does my Jonathan need to be the same gender as me?
Okay. So it feels like there's one question in there, but there's some little branches in there. So don't let me forget to talk about the branches in here, like if I get on my tangent or whatever. So let's talk about the idea of a spouse being your Jonathan. First of all, is that a bad thing? I don't think it's a bad thing to have a close relationship with your spouse. That is where you can share all of your struggles and you can do all that. I would say culturally, we look at that and say that's a healthy marriage, right? If we look at the Bible in its context, that's not how marriage typically went at this time in history and culture and location and all that kind of stuff, which is why David says your love for me is greater than that, than women, like all that, because there was this expectation of servanthood and care that the wife would provide for her husband. And that doesn't mean that husbands didn't do it for their wives and all that too, but that it was there. And what he's pointing out is that our relationship was deeper and more connected at its core. And the way that you served me and loved me was more sacrificial than even my wife would be able to do for me. Like even somebody I'm married to and have this connection. And so he's not, once again, it's not a sexualized thing or a romantic thing. It's talking about the intimacy of their connection and their friendship and their relationship together. So it is a rather intimate thing to be there. So I think you can have some aspects of that for sure in your marriage. I also think it's healthy to have that outside of your marriage. I think that there are the importance of having some same gender relationships, of recognizing like, hey, I just said earlier on my brother, he can speak to me and we can talk what it means to be as a husband, as a father, that my wife can't make that connection. She just can't. You know, that's not a knock on her when I say that, but I have to have other dudes in my life that I can sit there and talk about. And this isn't like, oh, I'm going to go bash my wife and kids now, you know, all that kind of stuff. Let's play fantasy football and bash our family. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about somebody who can say, man, this is just hard, right? And they can say, yeah, no, man, I get it. I'm in the same boat with you. I make that connection for sure. You know, it was interesting this past week. If I were smarter, I would have recognized early on this sermon and how self-aware, how it impacted my life and my family's life and our friend group. We have some really close friends that we've had for the past 3 years that have moved here for a job and are now moving away at the end of this week. And it's been emotional these past few months as we've like recognized we're in this countdown phase. My kids are close with their kids. My wife is close with their wife. I'm close with the husband, like all these kinds of connections. And there's a whole core group of us that really feel this. And it wasn't until Saturday night when Ash is like, hey, what are you talking about, David? And I said, yeah, David and Jonathan and the friends, and you know what it's like, having the importance of having those close friendships and losing that. And she's like, well, I don't even want to go to church now. Like, you know, thanks for that. Like I intentionally wrote, I didn't even click, and it was like, oh yeah.
I think she sat by him too at church.
Oh, yeah, she did. Yeah, she was there. It was all connected. One of our other friends who's close between services, I walked by her and she looks at me, she goes, yeah, you better walk away. It was like, yes, this was the spirit, not me, because I was not that intentional at all in planning this, just trying to be obedient. But there was some healthy stuff within there, and I'm so thankful for that relationship. And we'll stay in touch, and we'll have that. It's different than when they're your everyday people. But man, I also know like God's going to provide that for them. He's going to provide that for us. You know, that's a huge component of this. Like, God puts people in our life for a reason. And so Jonathan was in David's life for a reason. Why? Because David needed it. Yeah. And so God puts people in our life. Are we aware of that? Are we intentional with that? Are we trying to build those relationships in there? Are we open to that? Will we allow ourselves to be vulnerable? Will we care enough to be sacrificial for others? Will we do those kinds of things that can invest and have good relationships? Will you do that and get burned? Yes, you will. Like that is part of living in a broken world. That will happen at times. You cannot allow some bad situations to rob you of some really great friendships. that we need in our life. You need those. And sometimes you're going to get that in a life group. Sometimes you're going to get that from other friendships. Sometimes they're long lasting ones. I think my wife has had friendship with another woman that, man, they've known each other since longer than we've known each other. And we live in the same neighborhood and they're connected. And I love her husband. He's a great dude. Like, it's one of those where you're fortunate to be like, oh, I'm so glad that your husband is cool and we can be friends and our kids can get along. Like, you really like those. But they just have this really great connection and piece of it too. And she has that Jonathan-esque relationship there. And that's fantastic. It's really, really important to have. So I think there's benefit in having some close connection with your spouse. I do. I think Scripture supports that piece of it as well. But I think there's really good benefit in having a non-romanticized relationship. You know what I mean? Not just your spouse, not just the romantic, not just those pieces that can be in there. And having somebody same gendered allows you to speak into some very critical components of your life that your spouse just can't. So.
And too, I was kind of thinking, just like men versus women wise, like I think the stereotype, or like when people talk about finding friends, stereotype is that like sometimes women have like a big group of friends, or we're friends with everybody, but not like really deep connections. And then men might not have a lot, or it's like harder for them to make friends, but once they do, it's like you guys are buddies for life. So thinking about that, I don't know, what do you see that might be true in that, or maybe like things that are different when it comes to finding a Jonathan, if that makes sense. Okay. So like, what would you say to like, I guess you can only really speak for the guys. Side
I can't.
Like,
I don't do a good job mansplaining. It gets me in lots of trouble.
I don't know. Yeah, so. I was gonna say. I mean, I think you do just fine, but it's a good call.
Mansplaining is when I try to explain something to a woman that she already knows. Sylvia, in case you didn't know what mansplaining was.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was okay. But yeah, so just from like the guy side of it, because that's like what we see, where like, guys don't have a ton of friends, but once they do, they really have a friend for life. So what's the difference between of us talking about like, oh yeah, that's my best friend? Like, what's the markers for it? How do I, like, because some people are like, is that my Jonathan? Do I have that? Do I not?
Yeah. So I think there's a wiring component, right? Like God created a male and female. God created them. All that Scripture tells us. That's very clear about all of that. Where we are similar, but we are different. Men's brains are different than women's brains, bodies, like all relationships, how we walk and view the world is just so drastically different. The old, I've heard this joke 1,000 times and it's so true because it just happened to me, where like I was playing buddy with my friend, guys, they were getting ready to move and all that. And we played 12 holes of golf. We played Woodside. And, I recognize after about 9 holes, like we've talked a lot about sports and golf. We haven't necessarily dug into some of the life stuff. We're well aware of what's going on. We're well aware of the emotions. We're well aware of this or that. And we'd had some other chats. But my brain also told me, your wife is going to ask you these questions when you get home. Like she's going to want to know stuff, right? And his brain kind of functions the same way. I think it's some of that. Yeah. So I was like, hey, so let's ask each other some of these questions so we can report to our wives, kind of thing. Gosh. Like totally did that piece of it. And there was genuineness in our conversation for sure. But it's just that our wiring is so different, Men look for connections, I think, most of the time around hobbies and shared experiences that we have together that like we can do in the moment. For women, it feels like most of their stuff is things that they have hobbies and shared experiences that are separate from one another that they can chat about together, and as opposed to experiencing together. That's a rule. That's, it's not like hard and fast set in stone. That's how it is.
Right.
But I think there's just wiring components.
So do you think like you guys really have to like both ways, but like, do you feel like you really have to change that way of thinking? Like, cause is that something that you would tell people like it's going to feel awkward or it's going to feel
it is, yeah.
Because I think that's where it's a little tricky is because when you find a person like that, you click, like because you're vibing, like, okay, no, we're going to be friends kind of a deal. But then on the other side of it too, it's like, are you really talking about like the important stuff, like making sure that you're okay?
And sometimes it just takes time,
so
right?
Like, is it natural? Like that'll just happen within time once you guys become more friends, or is it something you have to be intentional about?
Yeah, I think for like, especially in what we're talking about with a Jonathan, one of the core component of all of this is Jesus. Right, like that's the common denominator in this, and so there will be pieces that I may have somebody that's not a Christ follower that, man, we're good friends, we connect. There's so many things, but there's this huge component of my life that I have that they don't. Right, so like it's almost like you're gonna hit a wall at some point in time, even if we connect right away on so many other things. there will be this wall or this ceiling that's going to get in the way, whereas somebody else I might not have the same amount of connection with, because maybe they don't love sports like I love sports. Maybe they are into board games or tech stuff that is not my jam or whatever. But we have this Jesus connection in there. Like over time, I do feel like those relationships can still be beneficial and can still grow. Now, there's also people in my life that I'm like, no, there's things that we have lots of connections between some of our love for entertainment and our love for sports and our love for Jesus. And so it's easier to be there and it didn't take as much time, but they're still worthwhile investments either way.
What about the people who, because like, I don't know, just the way you were explaining that. What about the people who are like, I have a Jonathan, but then it's like, oh, but we don't really talk about Jesus that much.
Yeah, then you don't have a Jonathan.
yeah. So that is the, like you just said.
You got a buddy, that's cool, I'm glad.
That's your key component.
Yeah. But for Jonathan, and he says it so many times, like let me see if I can find this verse in here. It was I have 5 points, so now I got to try and find my 5 points.
Because I think that's what I'm trying to get at is where people are like, do I have that? Do I not have that? Like, what are the,
Yeah. So Jonathan, right here, it's 1 Samuel 23:16. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Right? Like there's so many times we can help people find strength. Don't give up, man. You got this. This is your dream. This is what you want. This is going to be so good. You've worked so hard. Don't stop now. All that kind of stuff. But strength in God, that's the difference between saying you've got this and God's in control.
Yeah.
Right? Like we recognize as Christ followers, no, we're going to point back to Jesus to be a component of that. And that's crucial to having a Jonathan-esque friendship, is that Jesus has to be the core component of that. So much so.
Yeah. Well,
I do want to say one quick thing on the side.
Ask.
Yeah, as we were talking about the relationship of like husband and wife and being a Jonathan and this or that, or same gendered, separate gendered, all that. Yeah. I think there's also wisdom in making sure that your Jonathan relationships are same gendered, because there's a certain level of intimacy that you want to reserve for your spouse.
Yeah.
Like I had one of my best friends growing up. Her name was Stephanie. Like from like 6th grade all throughout high school, Stephanie and I were really, really good friends. Like really connected, hung out all the time. There was never really anything romantic between us. Like we were just good friends, like great friends. She got in a very serious relationship with a guy named Jake Grossman. Everyone said like Jake and Stephanie are going to wind up married, and they did. Jake Grossman and Stephanie. It was great. Fantastic, right? And I love Jake. Jake's a friend of mine. Super great thing. I love this couple. They're awesome. The moment that she got into this relationship where she said to me, and I remember this, we'd gone to a movie, dropping her back off at her house, and she was like, hey, I got to tell you, I started dating Jake Grossman. And like, she didn't tell me at first because she was not sure about everything. And she goes, but I think this is like a legitimate thing. The moment that became really transparent, like, they're going to be a thing. They're going to get married. It's going to be the relationship. I had to step back, right? It would be totally inappropriate for me to continue that kind of relationship, to have that kind of thing. No, that's not good for Jake, and that's not good for Stephanie. It's not good for me. So I just pull way back on that relationship. And so a lot of times, even when we go down to Cincinnati, like this past time, I said hey to Steph a little bit, and I had a much longer conversation with Jake, even though years ago it was different, right? And there's some appropriateness in that and boundaries that are healthy. And so I think like it's not bad to have friends that are the opposite gender, but there needs to be safe boundaries, especially when it comes to marriage, it comes to those levels of intimacy and connection. And it's just, do the wise thing, because that friendship is not worth your marriage.
Right.
So like it's always important to say that. So as we're talking about friendships, or as we're talking about that, like I just want to put that caveat in there. All that to say, we will read on about the story of David.
Until next time.
Hashtag Bathsheba.
Is that what's next?
No, it's not what's next.
Oh, I was gonna say that would be.
No, we got a few weeks before we get to Bathsheba. Yeah. So.
Nice. Well, yeah. Give us a little teaser. What's next? At least. I mean, we already right. We already should know what's coming up.
I'm actually super excited because these next 3 weeks, we've got different people speaking. It's not me. And so I'm excited to see.
Who is it? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Top of your head?
Trent's going to speak for us. Larry's going to speak for us, and Andy's going to speak for us.
Oh, nice.
And I'm super excited. Each of them has a great talk. It's going to be so fun. Yeah. And I think each talk is. Like if you were to put the 3 talks that we're doing and like line them up with speakers, they're not the ones that you'd probably expect.
Oh, okay.
Which is great. Like we did this in our teaching team meeting, and the way that it played out, and I was like, this is so much fun. Well, these guys were just super excited about some of these too,
Yeah.
And so I think it will be cool. I think there's going to be one of the talks is a little more obscure story. that I think is going to be really fun to dive into for people, and gives a lot more flavor to David, but also to just the people around him and the principles. Like Jonathan was a person around him. So I think that's just incredibly exciting and going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that. We still got several weeks to go on this David series, and we're only 3 weeks in, so it'll be good.
Alrighty. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Jake, for talking, I guess. If you're still with us, thanks for watching.
Harsh.
But yeah, we'll like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll see you on Sunday.